Superficial charm. Imagine yourself as a fish at the dark bottom of the ocean, and in the distance you see a light. What could it be? You can hardly resist it. It glows enticingly, drawing you in. Safe. Inviting. But as you get closer and closer, you're met with a horrifying realization. A set of large, sharp teeth reveal themselves. You've been lured by an anglerfish. The irresistible light was merely bait, and now you're the meal. The same thing often plays out in the human world when we're talking about superficial charm. Smooth, highly polished, but ultimately shallow and designed to disarm or manipulate you. A psychopath can be incredibly witty and engaging, and seem to say all the right things to make you feel special or understood. But beneath the surface, there's a lack of genuine depth and authenticity. It's all a performance. A great example of this is Hans Lander from Inglourious Basterds. In conversation, he can come across as incredibly polite, witty, and affable. This charm, however, is a terrifying weapon. It's a meticulously crafted performance that he uses to toy with people, subtly creating fear by letting them know that he knows what's up, before he reveals his sadistic, callous nature and goes in for the attack. In real life, you might encounter Borden. At a party, Borden quickly becomes the center of attention, captivating people with his stories and offering seemingly insightful compliments to everyone. However, if you look closely, you might notice Borden's interest rarely goes that deep. His stories are hard to verify or have many inconsistencies, and he skillfully avoids answering direct personal questions. So, how do you deal with this? Well, firstly, be wary of charm that feels too good to be true or overly intense too quickly. True connection builds over time and requires more than just flattering words. Secondly, prioritize consistent actions and follow through over smooth talk or grand promises. Actions reveal true character. Finally, trust your gut if something feels off. Your intuition might be picking up on subtle inconsistencies or manipulative undertones. Pathological lying and manipulation. Lying is second nature to a psychopath. They may lie without any apparent reason, just for the sport of it, or as part of intricate manipulations. They're skilled at twisting facts, strategically omitting information, and making you doubt your own perceptions, aka gaslighting. Imagine a master puppeteer with near invisible strings. You're the marionette, believing you act freely, but a psychopath will subtly pull threads of guilt, charm, flattery, fear, or intimidation. It starts small, but over time they gradually add more and more strings, entangling you in their plans, orchestrating your actions for their benefit, making it hard to tell where your will ends and their control begins. We see an interesting portrayal of this in Oliver Quick from Saltburn. After fabricating a tragic backstory, he gains entry to the Saltburn estate. Once there, he tailors his persona to exploit each family member's weaknesses, isolating his targets and eliminating rivals. His patient, multi-pronged deception ultimately leads to the Catton family's demise, and to Oliver inheriting their fortune. In real life, you might know a Stacey, who always seems to have a hidden agenda, strategizing for her own gain. She might subtly pit colleagues against each other, create false narratives to cover her mistakes, or expertly play on people's sympathies to extract favors or resources. When confronted, Stacey resorts to gaslighting or feigned victimhood, turning the tables on the accuser and making them feel guilty for daring to question. So when faced with this behavior, how do you protect yourself? Well, firstly, always try to verify information independently, especially if it involves your resources, safety, or well-being. Don't take important claims at face value. Also, make sure to document important interactions and agreements, particularly in financial, legal, or workplace matters, where accountability is crucial. And remember, directly confronting their lies is usually pointless, because a psychopath will simply attempt to further manipulate or gaslight you. Instead, your focus should be on protecting yourself from their deceit. Lack of remorse or guilt. This is an inability to feel regretful for hurting others, breaking rules, or causing damage. They might rationalize their behavior, often blaming the victim by saying things like they deserved it or they were asking for it, showing a cold, stark indifference to the consequences their actions have on other people. You can think of it almost as a teflon conscience. When it comes to guilt or remorse, no matter what wrongdoing or hurtful action sticks momentarily, it slides right off without leaving a trace or a stain. There's no lingering sense of responsibility, no residue of regret to scrub away. The surface remains perfectly slick and unblemished. An example of this is Marlowe Stanfield from The Wire. He's a ruthless drug lord who orders murders and commits violent acts with cold, emotionless pragmatism. He shows absolutely no remorse for the lives he destroys. For him, it's simply the cost of doing business and maintaining his power. His entire focus is on his name and reputation. In real life, you may encounter a Jack Dougherty, who, after causing a serious car accident due to speeding, shows no concern for the other injured party, instead complaining about the damage to his own car and how inconvenient the situation is for him. He might even blame the road and say, well, if it was a little drier today, then this wouldn't have happened. So how do you deal with someone who shows no remorse? Well, don't expect genuine apologies or for them to learn their lesson in a moral sense. Their understanding of wrongdoing is entirely based on negative consequences for themselves, not for others. Instead, base your decisions on their consistent pattern of behavior, not on any promises of future change that aren't backed by long-term, verifiable action. And most importantly, prioritize your own safety and well-being. If someone repeatedly harms others without remorse, it's a strong indicator that they're likely to continue doing so. Lack of empathy. This is when someone fails to understand, share, or even recognize the emotional experiences of other people. They may view others' emotions as weaknesses to be exploited, or as simply irrelevant. There's a distinctly cold, detached quality to their interactions, especially when empathy would normally be called for. In many ways, empathy can act like a mirror. When you express an emotion, someone with empathy will reflect a part of it back, showing that they understand and share your feeling. With a psychopath, however, that mirror is more like a black hole. Your joy or pain reaches it, but your emotions are sucked into a void, vanishing without a trace. There's no discernible impact on the psychopath's state, no warmth, just an endless emptiness where that mirrored feeling should be. Ramsay Bolton from Game of Thrones is a textbook example of this. He takes sadistic pleasure in the physical and psychological torture of others. He shows a complete and utter disregard for their pain, fear, or humanity, viewing them merely as objects for his cruel amusement. In real life, you might encounter a Duke. Imagine you're at work and you see Daisy sharing news of a serious family illness, visibly upset. Duke responds by impatiently tapping his foot, rolling his eyes, and immediately changing the subject to a work task, showing no acknowledgement of Daisy's distress and not offering any words of support. So, how do you deal with this? Well, avoid sharing deep personal vulnerabilities or expecting emotional support. At best, this information will be ignored or dismissed, or worse, it might even be used against you. Also, recognize that psychopaths don't get feelings the way most people do, and it's not your fault. Don't think that their coldness means that your feelings don't matter, or that you did something wrong to deserve it. Instead, build and rely on a strong support system of genuinely empathetic individuals for your own emotional well-being and validation. Impulsivity. Psychopaths have a low boredom threshold, a constant craving for excitement or new experiences, and tend to act on whims without considering the consequences. This can often lead to irresponsible, reckless, and sometimes dangerous behaviors. They may struggle with long-term planning if it interferes with their desire for immediate gratification. A psychopath is like a shark that must constantly swim to breathe. There's a desperate, perpetual need for a continuous flow of high-intensity experiences and stimulation just to feel alive and avoid the perceived suffocation of stillness or routine. For a psychopath, their capacity to act on a whim is like a hair trigger on a mousetrap. An idea pops into their head, and snap! They go from off to maximum overdrive in an instant, leading to extreme reactions, even to minor annoyances, or all-out pursuits rather than level-headed responses. A stark example of this is Tommy DeVito in Goodfellas. He's incredibly volatile and impulsive. His murder of Billy Batts over a minor insult, and his shooting of Spider over perceived disrespect, are prime examples of acting on immediate, violent impulses with no thought to the massive repercussions for himself and his crew. In an everyday scenario, picture Gauguin. Gauguin constantly makes grand plans, starting new businesses, moving to different cities, committing to serious relationships, but always abandons them as soon as the initial excitement wanes, or a new, more appealing whim arises. Gauguin might impulsively quit jobs, accumulate debt through reckless spending, or fail to show up for important appointments, leaving others to manage his mess. So how do you deal with this then? Well, firstly, don't rely on a psychopath for critical tasks or long-term commitments or stability without substantial, verifiable evidence of their ability and willingness to follow through. Also, protect your own resources. Avoid investing in their impulsive ventures or repeatedly bailing them out of self-inflicted problems. And that's really important, by the way. Don't go around fixing their mistakes. Allow them to face the consequences of their actions. Sometimes it's the only way they might learn, if at all. Above all, though, if you are dealing with an individual you suspect is genuinely psychopathic and you feel threatened or harmed, you should prioritize your safety and consider seeking professional advice or help from authorities. Get that person out of your life, and remember, you don't have to deal with this alone.